together with the Newcomen Society and the Stanley Museum, are having a centennial commemoration up there. Ruth and I and a lot of the other Stanley owners plan to go, and so this is really just about a day and a half of activities, culminating with a parade. And I'm going to take the mountain wagon because I tried to find out what cars they would have in the parade and figured they should have as many Stanley models as they could possibly get, and they didn't seem to have a mountain wagon. I said, you got to have a mountain wagon. So I don't exactly cherish towing the mountain wagon all that distance. It's a pretty heavy thing to tow, but I'm planning to take it. The next thing I can think of is the Concord d'Elegance out of Pebble Beach, California, which has become quite a, I guess you'd call it the Duesenberg or the Rolls Royce of car shows. Very fancy one. Usually cars restored to the nth degree. Have you ever been to that one, Tom?
No.
I never have either.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
really not my cup of tea. You've been, haven't you, Chuck? Well, this year they're featuring steam cars out there. They started out to be featuring the Doble steamer, which was built in California, but then they learned it was the 100th anniversary of the Stanleys, so Stanleys will be featured also, as well as white steamers, and that's about the third week in August. I'm not going, but there are a number of cars from the east that have been chosen to go. And I'll pass this around since it gives a description of what they're going to have out there and some of the cars that will be part of that this year. And the third thing, Hagley, last fall had a very successful event called 100 Years of Cars, and it was so successful, I guess, that they wanted to do it again, and it was highly successful because of the Brandywine region and the help they gave Hagley in putting it on. And they got, 7 other regions, I think, to cooperate with Brandywine to do this. Mel Chase was president of Brandywine last year, and he and Chuck and Jim and many others deserve credit for a wonderful show. So this year, they were going to do another one. They wanted to repeat, and they were going to call it 100 Years of Oldsmobile, because I think Olds is the only automobile still being made that started as early as 1897. But then they learned that it was also the 100th anniversary of the Stanley. The Stanley didn't last quite as long as Oldsmobile, but they want us to do an exhibit of Stanleys and of associated things, not only cars, but to put together a little exhibit. And Jim Teal has been asked by the region, or by Hagley, or by both, to kind of coordinate what we can do here to put together an exhibit for Hagley on September the 20th. So I asked Jim if he'd like to come tonight and see what we're trying to do in this group, and to tell us anything he'd like to tell us, or whatever about that. And I thought that there's a possibility here, Jim, that as far as getting cars over there are quite a few potential drivers. They're not all there yet, but they might be by September. And so last year we had one. Well, I had two because Bob Riley came in from Colorado to help me. But so maybe it'd be easier to get more cars there if you want that many. So, you have anything you'd like to say about that, man?
Well, thanks, Tom. I'm just really wading into this. Dan Muir, who's the director over at Hagley, asked me if I could work with Tom to try to put together a feature for Stanley's, a centennial feature, to go right along with the Oldsmobile feature. So I'm here to help, really. The first thing that comes to mind is all the Stanleys that Tom has right here in River City. But then I think there are others around. You perhaps know where they are. And maybe we could extend
There's
some
a-
invitations.
Yeah, there's a fellow on the main line that has about 3 or 4. His name is Sullivan, Tom Sullivan. You know him.
Yeah, we work for him. He's up in Holmes, Pennsylvania. He has 3.
I don't know how much he's doing with his cars now.
Well,
I'm-
I would say this is the time when he's starting to get into them again. All right, they've been put away for the winter and stored quite well. He has an environment similar to yours and they're well cared for.
George Hughes and
George's is now up and running, but not recently, but I haven't had it going over.
It's very similar to the H5 model that I have. They're 2 of the original H5s, which are about as choice as any model you can have. And I'd like to see George get more active again with it. Bill Schwobel, I think, lives in the house where George grew up, don't you, Bill?
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
But I don't have a Stanley steamer.
He didn't leave one in the back of the garage.
All
did he?
right.
And, of course, Marvin Clare, but I don't know if Marvin would feel able or willing to get his out and take it anywhere now. But he should know about it, at least. Chess Lewis sold his, and Bob Park and Andy, they're good prospects to get a car over there. You gotta fix the right front tire if you want this one, Bob. Got a jack under it now.
Okay, well, that's a possibility.
Are there any other local cars now? I can't.
Tom, do you know a James Keith in McLean, Virginia?
Yeah, I know Jim. Jim has
Okay,
2 or 3 very nice cars.
He showed one at Winchester last month.
Jim's down at Eastern Maryland this week on what they call the Patsy Tour. And I think Patsy stood for Pioneer Automotive Touring Club or something. And the dues was 0 for the first 20 years of its existence. And I was a member during all that time. And I tried to get out of being a member because I wasn't participating, but they kept me on the mailing list. But finally, I dropped out. But Jim says he's still a member. They're having terrible weather so far.
Boy, now.
They're down at Easton, I guess, maybe at the Tidewater Inn. I don't know where they are, but having a pub tour this week. And then he'll be taking one of his cars to Newton week after next. Well, it's next week, actually. Yeah, I know Jim. He might come. And then Frank Hicks had a car at Hagley last year. Frank's from Colorado, but he and his wife have a place on the eastern shore of Maryland, not very far down, just below the Bohemia River there. And so he had a Stanley with him here in the east last year, so he brought it over to Hagley. Well, I don't think he can come this year, though. He told me, I was talking to him on the phone, I think he has some other commitment. Other than that, I can't really think of any steam people around.
Well, Chuck, you know Sterling Walsh from Maryland?
Yeah, oh yeah, I've talked to him.
Yeah, that's right. Sterling's not too far away.
Yeah, and Bob Gialli up in northern Jersey, he's the president of the Olds region.
Hart has some stuff up
Hart
north Jersey too.
And Don Davidson was down at Hagley last year. And
Charlie Johnson, I guess.
Charlie Johnson, not that far away.
But Sterling doesn't have a Stanley, does he?
Yeah, he has a
He
nice
does?
one, but he never
22 or
uses
something?
it much, doesn't he?
I didn't know he had one.
I think it's a
Yeah.
little earlier than that, maybe
Can you bring
19 or
both?
20 maybe.
Yeah, I had a ride it years ago.
Yeah. Okay, well, so much for Hagley, but if you think of anything, I just wanted to bring these things to your attention, so you know that it was, it is a big year for the Stanleys. And for our part here in Delaware, I'm sure we'll do the best we can to put together a nice exhibit. The subjects of classroom study, I say all these things with quotes around them because I'm not a teacher, but that we had on that original list, the ones we covered were boilers and controls, burners, etc., engines and pumps. The ones we did not cover much were brakes and danger points, Stanley models and the numbering system that they used, and condensers versus non-condensers, although we talked some about that in the course of our operating the cars. But despite all these lectures and stuff, of course the core of learning is in the driving and having problems occur and learning to fix them. And that's what we need to do as much of as possible to really progress here. I think I made a mistake by using 3 different cars in this first driving phase. We started out with a 1910 Model 71, which you all drove around the driveway, and I guess none of us drove on the road because I think maybe we did the first time. Anyway, we used that the first day on the road because was with that car. And then we used the mountain wagon once, and then we used the 16 condensing car once. And so switching around, I know is hard. It's hard enough to stay with one car. So I think what I should do for the next driving phases is probably to assign you fellows to a particular car, and that'll be your car for the rest of this year. Not that you have it by yourself, but I mean 3 or 4 per car. And then you can try to familiarize yourself with that particular car. And we won't switch around all the time and wonder, where the fire valve is and where this is, because they are a little different, especially the left-hand drive cars versus the right-hand drive, that sort of thing. Some of you have asked, well, couldn't we label the valves? And you certainly can. I just have never labeled them. But if it makes it easier, then sure, it's certainly the most important ones. We can put a tag on there to help you out on that. Then I know that some of you have said, well, we don't learn much as long as everything's working perfectly. Well, maybe it hasn't worked perfectly, but it's worked pretty good on all of our driving. We haven't had any real problems. And I guess when you have problems is when you really learn. Didn't tell them about the flat that Bill Rule and Herb and some of us had to fix there. But Bill kind of led the effort on that the other day. But you don't have to know anything about steam to fix a flat tire. But he was a big help. And that occurred on the 1916 car. Whenever the last Saturday was, I guess about 10 days ago. But I just listed down the most likely things that might happen, and I don't think any of these things have really happened. Part of them probably because I was right on you all the time about don't let it happen, but I suppose the most likely thing could be, I put these in what I think are kind of the order of probability in which they might occur. Flooding the burner with raw fuel, an explosion or fire that this can create. We haven't done that. We might have done that, but you all remember how we go cautiously, turn the fire on, turn it off, let it pick up, turn it on and off, little squirts before we go at it full blast. Another thing that hasn't happened, I don't think we've had a pilot go out. I think one of the early days we trips, I guess it was in the 10, we thought it went out. Didn't we, Bob?
Yeah. Yeah, when Andy was driving, the power went out.
It wasn't out, was it? We thought it was. Or
It was out.
Was it out once? Okay,
Yeah.
the pilot did go out once. Well, the pilots do go out. There's usually a reason for it, but you don't always know the reason ahead of time. And, so it's good experience to get your eyes watering once in a while. Charlie Johnson, which some of you know has been mentioned tonight, is having a steamer close by. He's not that close, but he's less than about 100 miles from here, I guess, 90 maybe. Charlie's an excellent steam man, and he has a 1908 what's called a Model F. His car is entered at Pebble Beach, which is in that circular passed around. But somebody, John Hopkins, related this story. Some of you heard it, I think, when John was here the last day. And somebody asked Charlie, "Is a Stanley hard to drive?" And Charlie said, "No, it's not hard to drive. You just have to learn to drive without watching the road."
Right.
Anyway, and lighting back at the nozzles, again, this can be caused by a number of things. We call this a backfire. And what it is, the flame gets back through the mixing tubes instead of being entirely on top of the grate like it's supposed to be. If there is fuel under the grate, it'll light, come out the mixing tubes and burn the nozzles. And of course, if your fire valve is on, you just keep feeding that flame. So what you have to do is shut your fire off and usually wait for it to go out. I think maybe some of you remember what a steam blower was. I had one on the 1910 car, and that will suck the fumes out quicker, but you still have to wait for all that to burn out before you light the burner again. The next most logical thing to happen would be the nozzles choking up. We were having a little trouble that way with the 16 car the last day we drove, but not bad. But very often little specks of carbon come through the vaporizer, come down and lodge in the smallest orifice, which is your nozzle, and choke up. And when a nozzle chokes up, if it's just one, it can cause an uneven pressure there, and that can cause lighting back. But other times it just affects your steaming quality. You just don't make enough steam and you can't go very fast. So there are two ways of cleaning nozzles. One is to poke them out when the fire's on and take a chance on singeing your eyebrows or whatever, but it usually doesn't light back on you. But really the correct way to clean them is with everything out, take the nozzle out and really get the chips out of there. The fourth thing that can happen, water pumps will sometimes get airbound and fail to work. We haven't had that happen either. And pumps should be relatively can't think of the word, relatively trouble-free, but once in a while they do fail to work, and sometimes I've had cars where they'll drive you up a tree trying to figure out what the trouble was. You get them working, and then you lose it again, and so forth. But again, I don't know how to tell you to know other than your water indicator, your boiler water indicator, and the sound of the pumps. If they quit pumping, they'll get very quiet. You won't hear anything, whereas normally you hear click, 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 or in the case of the condensing cars, a long clunk, 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 depending on how the pumps are driven. But if you don't hear anything, chances are they're not pumping water. Packings need a little attention. Steam packings in the engine on your valve rods, your cylinder rod, your piston rods rather. In some cars more than others, if you have perfectly smooth rods, brand new or else hard chrome plated, chances are packings might go a year without ever being taken up. But some of mine aren't quite that good, so sometimes they have to have a little attention. Fuel pump packings also get leaking. Have to be checked once in a while in your pump box just to make sure you haven't got any bad leaks there. Another thing that can happen is your vaporizer choking up. Now that's the coil of pipe in your firebox. You remember the fuel passes through, changing from liquid to vapor, and you just hope that no carbon is formed in that process. But sometimes if you get bad fuel or something, you will get carbon. It can also occur because there's too much vaporizer pipe to start with and the fuel gets too hot. And sometimes it's your vaporizer, sometimes it can be the branch forks coming down to the nozzles on the outside. they're easier to clean because you can get to them. And also the pilot vaporizer will choke up once in a while, or the little branch fork coming down to your pilot. Sometimes easily cleaned. They have clean outs on the branch tubes and on the branch forks, the later cars anyway. But sometimes, remember there's a cable inside that vaporizer, and that cable is in there for a couple of reasons. But one is it keeps the fuel around the outside of the pipe, and therefore the fuel gets more heat and passes through there. It vaporizes better. And the other is that when it does get choked up, you can usually pull the cable and work it around and loosen up that carbon and then blow it out. I say usually. I've seen cables so tight you can't pull them. I've seen other cables so tight you almost can't pull them, in which case you have to drop the burner and get some heat on the vaporizer with a torch and all, and then try to pull it. Sometimes once we've gotten it out, there'll still be blocks of carbon in the vaporizer pipe, and we can sometimes light that off by heating the pipe hot enough and then putting oxygen through one end of the pipe, and you can just see it burn right out. Sometimes you have to throw the vaporizer away and make a new one. Throttles can leak, and throttles do leak, and sometimes you can run a car 2 or 3 years and the throttle won't leak, but probably at the end of that time you have to take the throttle off and lap it in a little bit, try to get a good seat and good throttle valve lapped in nicely again, and then it'll last for half as long as it did the first time. There have been people making new throttles, and some of them leak, some of them are very good. I bought a new one from England and put it on my 30-horse car, and I've only run that car 5 or 6 days, I guess, since it leaks. But I think it was a case of the throttle's all right, it just hadn't been lapped in good enough when it was made. Now this is number 8 on the list, and some people would put it number 1, but I wouldn't, because I think you fellas have been learning and you're going to be careful enough that it's down to number 8, and that is scorching the boiler, running it dry with the fire on. This is expensive but not dangerous usually, but something none of us like to do. It's something probably all of us, if we've driven at Stanley long enough, have done. And I don't think anybody's quite immune, although I don't like to admit to it. And I don't think I've scorched the boiler for 30 years now, but that's not to say it won't happen tomorrow. But it is a possibility. So I've just listed those things, and we can have group indoor discussions to talk about them, and maybe that makes sense at this stage of the game, but I still think we need to schedule some more time on the road. You'll learn more that way, and I have in mind either 3 or 4 cars that we would use for these continuing driving experiences, and 2 of them are condensers and 2 of them are non-condensers. I expect the non-condensers are the ones that everybody would like to have assigned to them, but I don't have 4 non-condensers I'd really like to use this way right now, and if we need about 4 cars, and I think we do. And really, I think the condensers are pretty good cars to learn on, because in some ways they give less trouble. The burner's a little harder to get to because it's around on the side rather than out front where you can get right to it. But in other ways, I think they're really easier. So I haven't made any assignments yet as to who goes where, but I just throw that out for your thoughts. But I do think it's a good idea to pick up. We have more or less 15 in the active group here, and so with 4 cars we can have 4 per car. If one only has 3, that's all right. But we'll kind of assign 4 fellows to a certain car and another 4 to another car, and do it that way if that's agreeable. It's going to be a hard call for me when I say some are ready to drive without me and some need a little more time. That's going to be a hard call because, some people will feel, well, I must not be doing very well. And that doesn't mean that you're any less capable. It just means that I think you need a little more time with it. But I'm not going to make that call tonight. So we come down to times we could do this, and obviously summertime is the best time. And unfortunately, there's a lot going on for Ruth and me here, and I can tell you the best time for me is going to be the month of July. After July 7th, it's pretty good then, all the way through the month. And I think that maybe with the long days, we could schedule some of these things in the evening where we could get, if we could start by 6 o'clock or something and go until 8:30 or 8 or 8:30, something like that. And maybe you'd rather do that than to take so many weekend times. And also, some can only come weekends, so we'll have some Saturday.
If you feel comfortable doing any of this during the weekday, people of us who are flexible enough to retire should be glad to do it on a weekday too.
That's what I was
I
going to
mean,
say.
during the day, it doesn't
Yeah,
have
sure,
to
it
be.
doesn't have to be a
That's what I
Saturday.
was going to add. I mean, if I work at night, Saturdays, it really doesn't matter. As long as I hit a certain amount
So
of hours.
any weekday.
And we have a couple retired fellows in the group, and they could come anytime, I'm sure. But I know people like John Hopkins, and 190 miles away or whatever he is, he can't really come on a weekday or a weeknight, but he prefer weekends. So we'll do a little bit of weekend too, but that's my thinking. Now, some of you may be away the month of July, so it doesn't suit you at all. But between now and the 6th of July, it really it's going to be tough for me to put in very much time on this. Now, August, September, and October don't look good either. I mean, and then in November maybe we can start indoor sessions again and get into some work projects, taking engines apart or maybe just putting them together if they're already apart, and some boiler work and some parts work. There's a lot of small parts things to be rebuilt on Stanley, such as automatics, needle valves, throttles, already mentioned. All these kinds of things can be done on the bench, but it's something that's very helpful to know how to do it. So I think once November comes, while we might have a couple of good weekends, maybe summer's going to be late this year.
Maybe we won't
It's a
have
little
it.
questionable when you get too late, because the days are short, you can't do anything in the evening that late.
I think we're going to get
So I
socked
think
this
from
summer.
here on, I would like to have some participation from everybody here. You certainly have more questions now that will make sense to you and to the group than it might have been at the start when we started. And I will say thank you very much for the videos that Bill Schwabel and Jim Riggleman, who's not here tonight, have made. I have them here. They've been kind enough to give me copies on some of the sessions we've had. So if any of you would like to borrow these, you're welcome to. Also, we've had a lot of reprints brought in of articles that people have found, and I think Bill Rule has something tonight he wants to share. But anyway, that's very helpful. I did bring a list of the 2 places that are most likely to have Stanley literature. If you want to send for any or phone for any, one is the Stanley Museum and one is the Steam Automobile Club of America, and I wrote down the names and addresses of both. I think the Stanley Museum is the better of the two sources, but if anybody would like those, well, there they are. I don't know this. So do you just want to speak as you would like to comment or have questions, or do you want to go around the room? Chris, go ahead.
The valves. I guess that maybe I'm underestimating you, but I can't believe that you would actually remember every valve on every car you own. Are there any tricks to help you identify a valve when you look at a strange car? Are there any tricks you use to kind of let you know one's a fuel, one's a pilot?
I might have to get through the dash and see where it goes on a couple valves here and there to make sure. Because sometimes the siphon valve and the firing up valve are kind of interchanged in position on the non-condenser. They would probably be the only two I would be sure of.
That might be one of the tricks we could do, just kind of like look on the other side of the valve and see what's connected.
And then
to it.
trace the pipe and see where it goes.
I think it regards to trying to fit everybody's schedule together. I think that the overriding factor there has to be you, because you have to be there every time. And I mean, it's a big imposition on you, and I'm sure we all really appreciate it. So,
Well, I hope
it's
we
not,
get.
it's not so much where do we fit in, it's what's
Well,
convenient to you.
Well,
The
yeah.
inconvenience should be on our behalf, Tom, not on
Well,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
Absolutely.
That's the reason I threw out my schedule, because I know what it's going to be. And
Now,
the
you're
month
the
of
boss.
July looks good, but the rest of it doesn't look so good for. And I think almost every date in July is open. Saturday the 26th may not be, but that's a quarterly meeting at Hudcastle, Richard. But I could miss that if I have to. I don't contribute much to that. Yes,
I have a
Bill.
question on carburizing of the vaporizer coil and the cable. Is there any regular interval you should service at, or you just
Well,
randomly
it
have problems?
depends on your philosophy on the thing. I've had some Stanley cars run for 10 years or 10,000 miles, whichever comes first, without ever touching the cable. So I'm kind of a belief, don't fix it unless it's broke, you know?
Okay.
But on the other hand, other people I know religiously pull that cable about every second day that they run and blow it out and then put it back. Well, I guess both are all right. But the fellows that seem to do that, now Brent Campbell, by the way, next winter I would really like to bring some experts in to address the group, and I think they'll come if we can pick a mutually convenient time. One would be Charlie Johnson, who's been mentioned. One would be Sue Davis, who's the curator of the Stanley Museum. One would be Art Hart up in North Jersey. One, well, anyway, and these, and one would be Brent Campbell. And Brent has probably driven a Stanley. I know he has, not probably. He's driven a Stanley far more miles than anybody else. I might have had the record for a short time, but he's got 3 times as many miles now as I have, and he's still got probably 20 years to go. He's in his early 50s now. But Brent is a very interesting fellow, and when you drive that much, you've had a wealth of practical experience. And I know he'd be glad to come, but he lives in Massachusetts, so we'd have to coordinate the time he could get here and all. But Brent likes to burn, mainly because on all these long trips he's taken, he's found so many places he can't find good kerosene. So he burns a mixture of diesel fuel and unleaded gasoline. Well, both readily available. So that's the advantage. And works better than I've used it on occasion, but I don't like it as well as kerosene. But Brent pulls his cable every 2 days. If he doesn't, he gets in trouble. And yet it works fine for him if he does that.
Because of the fuel mixture, it gets in trouble?
Apparently. He uses about 2/3 or at least 60% diesel fuel. And normally I would think that would carbon up so bad you'd never be able to do anything. But apparently with that much unleaded in there, 1/3 unleaded or 40% unleaded, it breaks it down to something fairly close to kerosene, and it gets away with it. There's usually a little bit of a blue haze behind the when he's going down the road, so his combustion isn't quite as good, I don't believe, but he does well with it. He's a great guy, so I'd love for you to hear from him sometime. But I don't, other cars I have had to pull the cable more frequently. I only had a couple times when I couldn't get it out, but I have had a couple. Just couldn't get it.
I think that the way you answered that question makes me want to ask what kinds of things you consider to be routine maintenance, must do on regular intervals. I know when we had the condensing car, we were floating the oil, for example, off the water tank, and that seemed pretty regular and important.
That's regular and important with a condenser. You never think about that with a non-condenser.
Right.
But blowing the boiler down, in our type of running, I'd say every time we run for a day, we should blow the boiler down. If you're on a trip, probably every other day, or as often as you can. Sometimes you're in places where you can't. But their routine, I think it's probably good maintenance to take the nozzles out every couple of days and look at them, make sure they're clean. But again, it's sort of, if they're not broke, don't fix it. I know that long trip that Bob Parks, father and mother-in-law and sister-in-law we were together in 1972, and the whole trip was 8,300 miles. I don't think I ever cleaned nozzles. And the pilot went out once, and that's why I was eating lunch somewhere. But that was exceptional. I mean, very exceptional. But I do think it proves that if you're using the car every day, you have less trouble than just when we use them occasionally. Bill, I know you had something you wanted to pass around, or said you would.
I just had the one copy for you to check before we made some copies and pass them around.
Well, it wasn't you. Oh, it was Bill Schwebel that had that. Yeah, Bill, I'm sorry, I had the wrong Bill. Would you like to tell us what you have there and pass them around for anybody who would like to have one?
Yeah, I made some copies from an old American machinist. Here's a couple for you. Magazine from 1909 shows a little bit about how they built the engines and all, and wound the wire on the boilers and things like that. The machinery they had to cut the slots in the bottoms of the burner, or the tops of the burners, and it's a little interesting article. But one of the questions I wanted to ask Tom, I read an article in the Stanley Museum newsletter, an older one, by Don Borden up in Vermont, I guess he is, about blowing down the boilers. And one of his things about that he says is very important is the more valves you have on the front to blow it down, the better. Because he says that really gets everything churned up in there and gets more of that scale scraped off of everything and shoots it out the front. And I know you said, I don't know whether it was during one of the classes or when I was driving one of the vehicles, that two's enough. Sometimes I guess one of the 30 horsepowers you had 3 on it. Four. And I just wondered whether he's pulling her leg, or because he builds boilers, maybe that's a good idea.
Well, I expect both of us are right. I think,
I'll go sit down.
well, boiler life is an
Billy,
interesting
where's that
thing.
ad that I gave you tonight? Maybe they want to see that.
It's out in the car.
Okay.
I'll have to get it after we're done.
John has built a lot of boilers, and, well, an awful lot. I expect he's averaged 30 boilers a year for probably 20 years now, so that's 600 boilers. He may have built that many. He's usually back ordered about a year. I've had a couple ordered from him. I've never had any of his boilers till now, but I don't have many spares now, so I thought I better have something. So I did order a couple of Don's boilers. As far as the blowdowns, one theory is what you just said, Don says. The more blowdowns you have, the more spots you have to clean the bottom head of that boiler, and the more force and velocity you can blow out, the more dirt's going to come with it. If you just have one or two, he would say, and maybe correctly so, that you might be getting it clean around those one or two places, but there's a lot of crud and stuff that can collect in other parts of the boiler. Having said that, I would say you shorten boiler life when you cool it too fast and when you heat it too fast. So maybe you don't get it quite as clean, but even when I only have two, I never open them wide because I think it may cool the boiler too fast. If you open them wide, you'll blow that boiler. Yeah, boilers are roughly at 450 degrees there, something like that, saturated steam at 500 pounds, about that temperature. And when you blow it all out in a matter of 3 minutes or 2 minutes, you're cooling that boiler pretty fast. And so I think 5 or 6 minutes is better. But that's another scenario. Now, we both may be right. You see what I'm saying? So I'm not going to say one's right and one's wrong. I know on boiler life, though, I don't put big, powerful burners like Baker burners under my cars for two reasons. Maybe at my age, I'm not quite as much interested in speed as I once was, and it is nice to be able to drive a Stanley 50 miles an hour and hold steam because the power is there in the engine. But when you do that, you shorten boiler life. You're putting more heat under that boiler, and there's no question you shorten boiler life. I don't want to refute Don, except that I have boilers that were retubed 50, 55 years ago, still running. The average life on, not necessarily the boilers Don builds, but the Borden cars, their own cars, average boiler life 3, 4 years maybe. And
Maybe there's something to it, right?
But the blow down is directly out of the bottom of the boiler. Right?
well, yeah, most it is. Now on the condensing cars, they used to have these surface blowdowns. Still came out of the bottom, but there was a standpipe, say halfway up in the boiler. And the theory of that was that you open your surface blowdown, you drew the water level down till it got to that standpipe, and the oil was floating on the water, and it would mostly come out the standpipe. That was the theory. I don't know. It may be a good idea. And I honestly can't tell you whether my 3 condensing cars have standpipes in them or not. We can check it someday. I really don't know. But
Well, I was wondering if anybody ever tried to bring a blow down pipe leading to the valve out, like at a tangent, so that you could get the stuff in the boiler going around like this, and still only have,
straight,
still not blow it down so quickly, but agitate it more by getting it.
Yeah, that's the way they design hot water heaters. Design on a hot water heater
might be
for
something
that
to do
purpose.
that. We never did it because of the configuration of the burner and all the way it fits up, and so we usually have a couple elbows, which isn't as good as straight out either.
Yeah. You've never wound a wire on the boiler?
Yeah, I have. I've never done many. Weldon Stump did a lot of them when he was here. We did Bob Riley's here, Bob, because your father-in-law got sick, remember? He started that blog for Bob, and we wound it, made it out all right. But I've never done many. Maybe that's the only. My dad used to wind them, and then Weldon Stump wound a lot of them. In the lathe, he had a stand and put bolts through the tubes and center up a pulley, a flat pulley, and drive it from the chuck on the lathe with a flat leather belt.
Oh, okay, because the lathe wouldn't swing the wheel, that's
That's
what
right.
I was getting at.
And then pull the wire through the tool post, usually with a little tension on it. And we didn't always know what the tension was, 10 to 20 pounds, I guess, just so it's nice and taut. And wind around and tie each layer separately so you don't cross-thread. Go across, tie, and then come across again. Follows right in the groove. And you tie them into the rings at the top and bottom of the boil to tie the wire.
And how, when you say tie, how do you
20,
mechanically fix it?
about a 16-penny nail. Anneal the end of the wire, and make a nice little loop there, put it around the nail, drill a hole the size of the nail in the ring, drive the nail in, cut the head of the nail off, and do the same thing when you get, that's how we did it. Stanley used to do it a little differently. They would kind of put a right angle bend in the end of the wire and hook it into a small hole in the ring. It doesn't really matter how you tie it in, I guess. Well, who would like to speak next? I know, I think Mel wrote me a letter and had some good suggestions and I think I tried to express a little of his sentiments tonight, but why don't you say a little more along those lines, Mel, if you'd like.
Well, two things I'd ask Tom. One was that Tom might share with us what his expectations for us are, where he hopes we would go, and I think Tom's done a very good job of that. He's looking for more steam and more involvement. One of the concerns I had, and Tom did share that, it was not registered as a complaint in our previous tour, was the difference between vehicles, and I think somebody else just said, how do you remember which valve is which on which car? I did not feel comfortable operating the system. And driving and operating the system were two different tasks, and I think you just said that when you said you don't see much of the road when you're behind the wheel. It's going to take a lot of time, for me at least, to really get familiar with what's important, managing steam, managing fuel, managing motion, to really feel comfortable behind the wheel of a steamer. And I'd like to have more hands-on. I'm one of those going to want a lot of shop time. But I'd also like to be involved in rebuilding. And my question might be, and Tom, you may know somebody that you haven't thought of. Marvin comes to mind as one. Is there anybody with a steamer who might entertain the idea of this group rebuilding it as a project?
Oh, I think so. We could find a lot of people like that, probably.
Because there's got to be steamers out there that somebody either doesn't have the right equipment, right experience, or manpower to do.
Well, there's two cars down here at Greenville. I didn't think about that when we were talking about who has local cars. It's a very strange situation, but I don't know if any of you know. His name will come to me. He's one of the owners of the old W.D. Shelley plumbing contractors. Matt Lusky, Gene Matt Lusky. And Gene is as nice a fellow as you'd ever want to meet. But Gene has two Stanleys. He's paid a lot of money for each of them. If he'd spend $2,000 or $3,000 more, he'd have something worthwhile. He got nothing right now. And himself, he doesn't have the aptitude. He doesn't grasp it. And I don't think he ever will grasp it, all due respect. I mean, I don't think he'd be a good member of this course because he just... But I've offered to help Gene. He bought his first one at an auction about 4 years ago up in New Hampshire. And they kind of sold him a bill of goods. It was supposed to be a special model. It was supposed to be an H5. And it was partly original. Not quite all reproduction. Not as nice as George Hughes's or mine, but, you know, not too bad. Mechanically, it was not good at all. He paid $66,000 at this auction for it. That was about 4 years ago. And I said, Gene, you're not necessarily stuck. If you'll spend $4,000 more on that car, and I'll help you, you'll have a pretty nice running car, and you can get your money out of it anytime, I think. Well, he wanted to know how I could run it, so I went down there one day, and I just about got it running. The burner wasn't in good shape, but I got enough steam on, so he whizzes out across the field there, waving at everybody. He didn't know how to burn her on it, and I was afraid he was going to burn it up. And he came, and I wasn't upset, but I was upset, but I tried not to show it. And I said, "Man, you don't know how to operate this car." I said, "Well, he goes down the street, and fortunately got enough steam to get down there and back." He had a son going to the University of Delaware, and he impressed me as being a boy that could take to it, you know, could learn. And I said, I think his name was David, I said, I'd love to have David come out and show him. I said, maybe you'd like to see my car run that's similar to yours and see how it should run, this kind of thing. Never heard of it, never heard of it. But I saw him somewhere here 6 months ago or a year ago. He says, I got another one. I got another stand. And I think it's probably a Carl Amesley car, but I kind of forget what it is. He's right down here next to AI School in Greenville, where he lives, on Hillside Road there. And, so there's a strange one, but that would be a wonderful project for us to take on his car and rebuild it.
What's the status of Marvin's car? What's the status of Marvin's car? I've seen it, but
Marvin ran it as recently as, I'll say, 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, he had it down here at the gas engine meet about 3 years ago.
Wilhelm. He was running it, and he was letting other people drive it a little bit. He had a gal that worked for the highway department who was driving it. She got transferred, so that was the end of her on the steamer. But Irvin, his son, has no interest in it. And Marvin,
haven't got enough horsepower for Irvin.
Marvin tried to sell it to Tom Ackerman, and I thought Marvin told me $40,000. I thought, well, Marvin, if you can get 40 for that car, you can come out smelling like a rodeo. But he told me more recently it was $30,000, but Tom had an operation and couldn't come up with the money, so that deal fell through. And so it's still for sale. In that range, I expect a little less would buy it, but it's, you know, everything piled up on top of it, but I don't think anything's apart. And wasn't the boiler retubed fairly recently, Bob? It seemed to me
There was work done on it fairly recently.
I think they changed the boiler, and I thought it was a boiler that your father-in-law had retubed from.
I think you're right, because I remember the contraption he had rigged up to
chicken wire.
Lift it in and out and so forth, and there was some things.
He's resourceful that way.
Yes, yes. Tom, I mentioned something to you, and I'd like to mention it to the group. Tom's relayed to you that I do have a Stanley, and that in some ways I'm a little ahead of the group, but the group is catching me very fast. I've been around Stanleys for a long time. It's been over 30 years through my father-in-law. And 1986, I did acquire one car from the collection up here. It's a Model 63, 1912, 10 horse, 4-passenger touring. It's a very interesting car in that it is, as Tom has told me, probably the most original car that he had in there. It was restored by Tom's dad's house painter in 1946 or something?
Well, before that, it was 43 or 4.
44. And the restoration consisted of painting everything red with some house paint. And Mr. Marshall was more interested in the more powerful cars, and after about 1949, I believe was the date, the car was just on display in the museum. It had not run when I acquired it, and over a period of time, my father-in-law and I did go over it, and we got it running. And we went on a tour in 1989. It was a very interesting tour, and I hope I'm not boring you, but to give you a little experience, I mean, I know all of you feel like you're novices at this thing. Well, between 1986 and 1989, I might, but I doubt that we got 100 miles on the car. And we got a lot of the bugs out of it from sitting so long. And there was some significant ones in there, one of which was the fuel tank. If it had one hole in it, it probably had 1,000 holes in it. But we went on a tour up in Maine, and it was there's an annual tour in the east and usually another one in the west, and this was the eastern one. And we put my father-in-law's car, which is out here in the museum, and mine on trailers, and we drove to Maine. And they have on Sunday night, it's a 5-day event, and they open it on a Sunday night, and they have a firing up banquet. You all have to get up and say something if you're a rookie. Of course, I was a rookie. It was my first steam tour, and they kind of had given out some information about what was coming. They give you a book and they tell you what's going to happen. And the next day, they had it listed for 113 miles that we would travel that day. And so I got up and I told them that if I made the tour tomorrow, I will double the miles that this thing has been driven in the last, whatever it was, 40 years at that time or something or other. And we got up and went. And Andy was with me. He was the co-pilot. My wife was the backseat driver. And we took off. And Bob Riley, who Tom has mentioned, was in back of me, and my father-in-law was in front of me. And I definitely needed some help. I mean, I probably felt very much like you all have felt. And we took off. Well, this particular car, as I said, was very original. So the top was folded down 50 years ago, and we don't fold it up because there's no threads left in it. The material's there, but there's no threads left in it. So about 6 miles out of the hotel, it started raining. And at about, I think the first scheduled stop was an optional one, and it said turn right to go look at this house if you want, and turn left if you don't. Well, Bob Riley, as I looked behind me, turned left, and that's the last I saw of him. We went right because I needed water. And we found water, and we took off, and we were going on a little bit further. I was probably getting on towards the later part of the morning, and one of the instructions said, now if you see the cemetery, you missed your turn. And Andy says, Dad, isn't that a cemetery? Well, my father-in-law didn't see the cemetery, and he just kept on going that way. Well, there I was in the middle of Maine, and we got into some very rural areas, and we were really rookies. But we made it. We made the whole tour that day, and unfortunately my father-in-law's car did go down. It was a choked, the wire actually, the cable got so hot it just blew up and expanded and just choked the fuel off completely. And he was not doing well at that time. It was near the end of his time here, and but we did complete the tour. But because the car had been sitting for so many years, there was a lot of water damage done to the engine, and things had rusted. And we had a hard time making it through that week. But I really enjoyed it. I mean, they are a lot of fun once you get comfortable. And we went 400 plus miles that week, and you get pretty comfortable when you do that much driving. But my car now has been sitting since 1989. because the rods on the engine are so bad that you just, I can only go 6 or 7 miles and the packing's just carved right out of the engine. So it's not a pleasure to drive because you're losing half of your steam and only have a 10-horse engine to start with. So I would be very willing, and Tom mentioned maybe we could bring the car up here for that one to be one of the ones that if ones of you in this group want to work on it, I'm very comfortable with having you work on that. I haven't done much work myself. I mean, Stump did all the work when he had, he knew how to do it, so he did it. Well, if I think the fuel automatic went, and here's one. He just had that fixed and things like that. So I have a lot of learning to do on the components, just as much as anyone in here. The only advantage I have is I probably have seen some of it over the past 30 years. But it's a car that needs to be gone over really almost completely now because it's been sitting for several years, and the engine needs extensive work.
Yeah, what would be the fix on that rod problem? New
Well,
rods or-
the one that I've heard that sounds the most feasible is that you must disassemble the engine and you must take the pistons off of the rod, and that's not an easy task because of the way they're constructed. But you have to take each pit and drill it and fill it, and then you have it chrome plated, ground, and hard chrome plated back to the original diameter.
Why can't you spray that?
That's a newer one, fix. That's a newer fix that I've heard of. If you can
I've
get
done many times a lot of things.
if you can get the pits filled, the problem is getting the
pits are filled. You just overfill them. And
Yeah,
bind
you
it
got to
whatever
get
size
the
you want.
pits. That's the thing, and you can spray it or
And I
harsh
can't
it.
see drilling it and putting studs in there and cutting
not
them off
studs.
and then
They-
polishing the whole thing.
Folks, why not just make new rods? I mean, it's no big problem.
Well, it's a forging. It's not easy
Well,
to get
yeah,
done.
but you can get high tensile steel shafting down the centerless
You
ground.
can get a solid billet work one
You
out.
might have to work out of a solid billet. I'm willing to look at
It's
at
no
all.
problem for that kind of stuff. I mean, chrome plating? Yeah, I can't do chrome plating, but I can
Well, I am willing to look at all the options, and
Well, you have options today if you didn't years
And
ago.
that
even
could
when I
well
got
be.
started in this racket.
the people I've talked to that had been successful. Of course, we had 50 cars on this tour, so there was a lot of suggestions you got, because I was blowing more steam out under the car than I was out the exhaust.
Well, I'd
And
like
everybody knew that.
I'd like to field another suggestion. I like your suggestion. Rather than bring in an unknowns cars, I think we could help you, but I
Yeah.
think we're indebted to this man over here.
Yeah,
And if he has something that has to be or should be
Well-
done here, here's where we should be.
and
Okay.
we
I
can do
don't
that.
really have any major projects. It's just unless we create major projects, and we may, because this is just to be expected. If I were to drive these cars as much from now until cold weather as we collectively are going to hopefully do, problems do develop. I might have things I don't know about now. And so I don't want any of you to feel, well, it was my fault and I didn't do it right and that's why something broke, because this stuff is 80, 90 years old. It may break anyway, even with the most care. But right now I don't have any major projects I know about. I just know that a lot of the work on the Stanley is young man's work. And the reason I say that is that so much of it is underneath, and I tell you, it gives my neck a fit underneath the car working. So I would welcome help from younger people doing
All right,
that
but
sort
through
of
your generosity, we are really indebted to you, Tom. I mean, I just, what's right is right. And here we are, through your auspices and your willingness, and I, for one, appreciate it, but beyond words.
Some of you've asked, well, where are we now? Where do we want to go from here? I asked, where do we go from here? But you've asked, is the course up to my expectations at this point? I think it is. I think you're doing great. I'm going to tell you that I have secretly graded everybody.
Oh, the other
Nobody's
set of
gonna-
books.
Nobody's gonna see the marks. And I will continue to, in my best judgment, see how everybody's doing. But my hope is, we've mentioned the Hagley affair in September. My hope is that we'd have at least 4 or 5 fellows who felt comfortable to drive a car to Hagley and drive it back again. And maybe in connection with that, they'd be willing to get that car ready, make sure it's polished up, looks nice, to do that. And this would be a great help to me. I mean,
Well, that should be a prerequisite of taking it to Hagley, is getting it ready and bringing it back and put it to bed.
You've already mentioned working in teams. Suppose maybe we work towards the teams taking the car. So there's the driver and then a couple other people to go along.
Well, that's
with each
okay.
car.
We may pick a little more exotic cars to go to Hagley. But when you get to a certain point, I mean, I feel that you're competent to take more than just the car you've been working with.
Well, it still could be that the team stayed together in some way or
Yeah.
something like that because they're used to working together and they've got some kind of relationship going that way.
Is Hagley in range of the water? I mean, for going and coming, or do you have to fill
Hagley's
down
set about 7 or 8 miles
Oh,
one
okay.
way. Yeah, and they'll have water over there if we ask them. I know they're very cooperative and that sort of thing. So if we need to tank up before coming back, but normally any of these cars would go round trip over there and back.
It's just one real big hill before you get there, too.
Well, I don't go Snuff Mill Road.
No?
No, I usually go 82 when I'm going with the steamers.
That final one down into the Brandywine Down.
Oh, well, we don't go there.
No, you're up on the hill.
We go in
Oh,
the-
okay.
We go in the other
Okay,
entrance.
behind Christ Church? And,
Yeah, you're up there at the library and all that.
Fireworks.
stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
That's nice of you. Could we maybe, if there's nothing else or other questions tonight, could we maybe spend some time in the museum and at least look at some of the Tiller cars? You can
Yeah.
point out some of the stuff on that to us.
Sure.
They look a lot different.
Let me just, well, maybe some of the rest of you have, but yeah, just back to this business of my expectations. Well, the expectations, I'm highly pleased, but I think where we need to go now is if we can schedule some days in July here, and maybe we'd ask you to sign up again. And if some of you are free and want to sign up 3 or 4 times, that's all the better, because I mean, it'll give you more experience, the more you can do it. And everybody doesn't have to have the same number of quote lessons, but naturally, the more times you can do it. I think everybody needs at least one or two more driving sessions with me in the car. After that, I think that these teams, if you all know a little bit and one can help the other, one forgets something, somebody else will be able to answer it. Let a team go by themselves. Maybe I'll go in a separate car, so I won't be far away, but we'll make a little trip somewhere, 15 miles maybe, and stay on back roads. Stop every 2 or 3 miles and just make sure everybody's doing all right. Make sure nothing is acted up that you didn't know what to expect and you have to ask for or something, this sort of thing. But that would be the way I think we could proceed on this. And by fall, maybe some of you teams can go out even when I'm not around.
It might be an advantage to you in forming of these teams and assigning, well, not necessarily assigning a car, but to know that, like, some people only have the weekends free, some people only have evenings free. I mean, myself, I've got, 2/3 of a year I'm going to be retired, and I got so much sick leave and vacation days to use up before that happens that I could be around any day. I mean, you name the day and I'll be here during the daytime. And there might be other people in the same situation that are already retired or something like that, so maybe a team could be one that people
Yeah.
have been.
And then some of you, I think, enjoy working with each other too, and you might like to pick your own teams a little bit, rather than just have me do it arbitrarily. But yes, let me just say a few things about the Stanley models, and then we'll go around if you have time. Anybody doesn't have time, well, they can excuse themselves. But basically, you have the tiller cars, which ran through the 1904 model year, and the reason some of the 1905s still have tillers is that Stanley never threw anything away. They used them up. So some of these 1905 cars featured the early coffin nose. They first came out in 1905. A few of the coffin nose cars still had tillers, and some had bicycle fenders. So there were all kinds of combinations. But some of the last without a coffin nose, well, I'm not sure of this on Stanley. I started to say some of the last of the buggy configuration had steering wheels, but I'm not sure they did. Locomobiles did, but I don't think Stanley's did. Then you had the coffin nose period, in which basically, well, as I say, started, we'll say, midway through 1905, and ran through 1914, with the exception of mountain wagons, and since they were phased out in 15 and 16, they never really put condensers on the mountain wagon. You'll see a picture of one down here that has one, but we think they only built about 2 cars like that. Had a closed body and a condenser, but for most of the 15s and 16s, they were like my 15, and it's basically a condensing car without a condenser. It still has the coffin nose. That part looks like the non-condensers, but it has all the other features of the condensing cars, but that's 1915. That was the largest single change in the Stanleys, was when they, between 14 and 15, they went from right-hand drive to left-hand drive. They went from wood frame to steel frame. They went from full elliptic springs all the way around to semi-elliptic in the front. They went from driving the pumps off the crosshead of the engine, actually off the right-hand wrist pin of the engine, to a crank arrangement off the rear axle, and they put the condenser on. So a lot of changes between 14 and 15. Then there were really only minor changes and refinements from then until the end. 1924 was really the last of the Stanleys. Some men attempted to restructure the company and made some cars in 1925 and 26 under the name of Steam Vehicle Corporation. We call them SVs. There's only about 3 or 4 in existence. They weren't as good as the late model Stanleys. They had some ideas that just weren't too good, but there are a few of them left. So that was pretty much the end of the Stanleys. The twins themselves were very much involved, and F.E. was the inventive genius, and he was the type of fella that Weldon Stump was, that my father was, maybe a lot of you are. I'm not, but the type of fella who could look at something and figure out up here just the easiest way to do it, even though he'd never done it before. As I think I mentioned early on, it was not surprising that F.E. decided to try to build a little steam car 100 years ago. But what was surprising was that he was so successful at it. And I keep saying he because while his twin brother was involved all the way along, one never did anything without the other, and they shared 50-50 in all profits on everything. One was the inventor. The other was a promoter, good businessman. Out in Estes Park, Colorado, it's all F.O. Stanley out there because he was the one that had the investment in Estes Park and built the Stanley Hotel, which is still there and all this. But F.E. Was killed in 1918, And the twins really sold out in 1917 and turned the company over to Effie's two sons-in-laws and another fellow. So from that time on, the Stanley twins themselves, who were old men by that time, they were about 68, from that time on, they really didn't have any input into making the cars. And the cars got heavier, probably more comfortable, but heavier, no more power in them, and less responsive, slower. Gas cars were improving tremendously through those years. Electric self-starter was the greatest thing that started that off, and then many improvements that came on. So the Stanleys just went down to nothing at the end. They built about 100 cars in 1924, which was their last year. Well, there are the definite periods. Within those periods, we have different horsepowers. But in the whole condensing period, except for the few mountain wagons, there was nothing but the 20 horsepower power plant, which had been the middle size. In the coffin nose period, we had 10 horsepower, 20 horsepower, and 30. And the 30s are the most scarce because they didn't build many. A few touring cars, a few Model Ks, which is the semi-racer, a few Model Ms, which was a big touring car, early touring car, none of which have ever turned up. Alan Blazek found what he thought were a few parts from one of them out in Montana. How they were got out there, I don't know. But really, no complete Model M's ever turned up, and a lot of mountain wagons. And so that was the 30. But they built the 10 horsepower would probably represented 70% of their total production during those years. They were the most inexpensive. They were what some call the bread and butter cars. They probably made more money for the company because they came closer to mass producing those models, building 500 or 600 a year, which isn't many, but more than they were building of the bigger ones. And then the 20 horsepower was a nice model, in between size. I have several of them, and then, as I say, very few 30s. But then the early cars, the tillers are less than 10 horsepower. The condensers were all 20 horsepower. I won't go into model numbers and designations, but the early cars had letter designations, and then after, starting with 1910, they had number designations. But that can't digest all that at one cracks. Basically, that's about all I need to say, but we'll work on this schedule, and but what's the best way to do this? I mean, if I schedule people for certain days, it's probably not going to suit you on that particular day. And,
why don't we treat it like a questionnaire?
Yeah, but
address it individually and respond to you and sometimes.
Well, yeah. Why don't I put down all the dates I can do it,
Right.
and then you check the ones you can do it, and then we'll make some assignments.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Are there any people who would commit to being in Hagley?
Being in Hagley.
To being in Hagley?
Well, I told him I'd be there, but then when I got sick, I don't know what I'm going to.
True, but I mean that would commit to being available for Hagley that would form one of the teams, or two of the teams, and give them the priority for schedule. That gives some incentive. I'm not saying that has to be, but that would meet your needs, Tom.
Yeah, maybe there'd be enough competition between these teams. Everybody would get.
I don't know. If you found me out.
Quick.
Jim, I'm not quite sure what Dan has in mind with other exhibits for Hagley. You know, I did just a very minimal thing last year. I just put a poster board or something with some photographs. I'd like to do more. We could, take some of the stuff out of our stand exhibit here, but again, it's not too well coordinated, and a lot of that maybe somebody would be interested in helping me put that together.
Tom, the exhibits right now are wide open. The next, Jim, Chuck, and I are on the planning team with Dan. Our next meeting is a week from tomorrow night. The door is wide open. The area Tom had last year indoors is a possibility, so rain or shine. There is a display possibility if you want to just have the history of Stanley or Steen. The door is wide open for suggestion there, as far as Hagley itself is concerned.
Well, Sue Davis from the Stanley Museum could provide us with a lot of good material if she has the time to do it, and she might. I know she's tied up two things that I know about, and probably half a dozen others, because there ought to be about 5 people doing her job, and there's one. But she's involved. They have a satellite Stanley Museum at Estes Park now. The hotel out there has new owners as of about a year ago. They spent a lot of money on it. It's going to be, and this is a hotel that FO built in 1906 to 1909, in that period. It's amazing it survived. But it's on a beautiful piece of property in Estes Park, although they sold off a lot of the hotel property for shops and stuff, and kind of, some things spoiled it, but it still has a nice view up where it is. But the hotel was never large enough to attract conventions. It only had 105 rooms, and so it really struggled through 4 or 5 different owners, but finally these people, it's one of these fancy hotel chains that has historic hotels, and anyway, Frank Hicks, the fellow who I mentioned, Colorado and Eastern Shore, was at Hagley last year. Frank's been instrumental in this and trying to get the Stanley Museum. Well, the Stanley Museum was interested, and now they got the owners interested, so they're going to have a satellite museum in the basement of the Stanley Hotel. So she's involved with that. She's also heavily involved with this Pebble Beach thing, Concours d'Elegance in August. But following that, maybe she would have time to do something for us September 20th.
Yeah, I think she's the person to do any kind of display thing. We should be concentrating on getting your cars, being able to get your cars there on display.
What do you think they want, 10 cars or 12, if we can get that many, Jim, or what? Chuck, what do you think? Or do you think this, I mean, I don't want them to think that I'm trying to monopolize part of the show.
No, the limit's 500, Tom.
And that doesn't count special features.
I have 14. Bob Clark has one that he didn't mention that might be available. I can't speak for the owner, and I guess he can't either. But
That would, I guess, be a challenge for us to see if we can get that one over
that
there.
wouldn't be such a big.
That'd be the one to take over.
And it looks nice the way it is.
Is it 13?
I just won't change the tire because I don't want to nick the paint. He can nick the paint.
I'll have to fix it too.
He can fix it.
Tom, whatever number you bring or have brought will be greatly appreciated. And any number of leads you can give Mr. Teal to follow up on and get other people bringing their individual cars or mobile cars.
Yeah, I think we should try Don Davidson. Well, Don's really isn't a Stanley, but it has a tie-in with a Stanley because Stanley sold out to Locomobil, and then 2 years later went back into business and bought their old factory back from Locomobil. And Don's is one of those cars that probably Stanley had all the parts to build, but the sale went through, and so it's actually a Locomobil, but it might even have Stanley gauges on it. I don't remember about that. And he had it down here last year. It's in 1899, and I don't have anything that old. And it might be if we give them enough notice that people can come from farther away.
Yeah.
Chris Greaves, Chris, his early car's not a Stanley either. That's a Locomobil, 1901. He does have a nice Stanley, but it's about 1911 it's 10 or 11.
Doesn't Art Hart have it pretty early, like
Yeah,
a
Art
5 or
Hart,
4?
Well, I guess he does. I've really never seen it. The one I've always seen Art with is his Model 70, which is
yeah.
a 1910.
He's advertised for a lot of parts for it
Yeah.
over the years.
Well, he had that 10 up at Rhinebeck last year. That was doing pretty
Yeah.
well.
Oh, it always does. Well.
And if we give this fellow in Holmes some lead time, I mentioned and you recognize he has 3 of them. He'd be more than pleased to come next summer. But he's a busy fellow.
Sullivan, Tom Sullivan. Yeah.
Sullivan.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, whether he can get enough help together to bring 3, I can't make that
I met
statement.
him up at Kinzer, I think, year before last.
Yeah.
He had 3
Yeah.
cars up there.
Right.
There's one guy working for him that can operate one. I don't know about the other car.
Do you? Do you have a fellow take one out?
Yeah.
Because I praise him also. I don't know what he has in the way of an operator.
Well, I'm sure we can probably get 15 Stanleys over there, maybe 10 to 12 from here, and then pick up some others.
Sure. But I think we should notify these folks, the intention. I think that would be the thing.
Is there a Stanley roster available that might show cars in the area?
Yeah, but it doesn't show cars that are running, it doesn't show the condition of them. Some might not, tires might not even hold any. But if you want a quantity of Stanleys, that's the roster and get through it. There's Jim Keith who was mentioned, and Jim might come. He's only a little over 100 miles away. Anyone, well, he has 2 cars finished. He's working on a 3rd. The Model 71 is what he uses the most. He has a Model K, which is a beautiful car, unless Jim partially kills it between now and September. He'll inject it again and get it alive again, but poor guy usually. But it is a beautiful automobile, and he's supposed to have it in Easton this week.
I think Ed Rowan has one too, as a Model 71.
He does. His is earlier than a 71, isn't
I think it's a 71 Roadster.
it? Is it? I thought he thought
I think I read somewhere that it was like 1911, isn't that?
Well, Bill, see, Tom knows what I'm talking about. A car like Rowan's, I think, you can call it 11. It's just like Ray Carr called his in 1909. It was built in 86, 95 or 96, with parts from everything, except it looks like a 1909. And, but this is not to detract from the show. They still make a nice appearance there. It'd be fine.
Those people won't know the difference. No.
And then there's Joe Fisher, isn't it? Joe? Yeah, up there near our car. He has a Stanley. Not Joe Fisher. I haven't got the right name.
Not the Fisher Island.
No, not our Joe Fisher. It's me.
No, that's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, he doesn't have one. In fact, he's sold out of it.
Joe's still living?
Yeah. Everything's going.
That's
That's the Fisher tank.
Beg your pardon?
Is that the Fisher?
Fisher tank, right.
yeah, the tunnel in our front yard is because of the help of Joe Fisher, the railroad tunnel. He knew where there was some tank cars to be scrapped. There was a trainer out in the edge of Chester there, and we went over, bought them, and made arrangements to get them over here on flatbeds. Stump cut them up and built the tunnel.
Put 'em in there.
You know, Tom, last year at 100 Years of Cars, Don Davidson was there with his locomobile, and he had his fiancée, who someone, I believe, told me is...
Sarah Stanley, great-grandson, great-granddaughter of F.E.
Yeah.
She, and I think they're married. I'm not sure whether they've got married yet or not, but she's still with Don up there. I don't think it's going to work. And she's establish somebody's age before I can talk about them.
Oh, well.
Sarah's 41. I don't know how old Don is.
You start somewhere.
Yes, she was one of 6. Effie had 2 daughters and a son, and the son had 6 children. No, the son had 1 son and 1 daughter who would be Effie's grandchildren, and the grandson was named Francis E. II, and then he had 6 children, and Sarah's one of those. Well, anyway, Sue Davis would be a big help on this, and I'll get in touch with. I'll see Sue next week up in Newton, and she's involved in that too. In fact, she's the featured speaker up there at luncheon on Friday. The lunch is sponsored by the Newcomer Society, and apparently their members. She'll give a good talk, but it's kind of old hat to some of us who have known her for years, but it'll be a nice affair. Saturday morning they're going to do an interesting thing. They're going to take us to all the Stanley sites around Newton. The homes that still exist, the sites where homes were, and then we go to a factory for coffee and donuts or something. The factory used to consist of a dozen buildings, and they took some of the buildings when they built that Charles River Parkway along just below. But the 2 main buildings, or at least 2 of the main buildings, are still there. And one of them was designed by F.E. Stanley in 1896, and it's an all-concrete building, concrete and steel, which was unusual for 1896. But I think they're original, and he built it to manufacture their dry plates. And they had, I guess, had a building there that burned or something, and that's why they were so. Well, it was interesting that the Bachrach photographers owned that building for 50 years. And they were photographers. That's where they built automobiles in between. Stanley dry plates originally, then automobiles, and back to photography again. Now it's an architect or somebody like that. Well, if you want to walk around, help yourselves. Did we have unanswered things, or was pretty? Yes, Jim.
I have just one announcement.
You're too late.
Am I? Everett DuPont sent me a fistful of passes for antique car admission to the New Garden Air Show, which is going to be on Father's Day, June the 15th. If anybody has an old car is interested in it.
So it's a better bargain, okay? And the logistics and the mechanics are going to always be a problem down there. Because people come together and they want to park together, they want to picnic together, da-da-da-da. And it's always been my concept to have the earliest stuff up in front of the last hangar, so to speak. It's high ground.
Yeah.
And then on the lower level have a more modern and sports cars and whatever. But it really doesn't work out the way the DuPonts would like it. But this is what we chatted about over the last few months while they were in Florida and Everett was up there. And the passes aren't a problem, really. There'll be some available there at the show, and I'll be there early that day.
What kind of timing should you plan on to get
Well, they're
there?
opening the field at 9 o'clock. They would like the cars on the field by 11. The show starts at 12.
Because the last time I tried to go there was maybe 4 years ago,
Right.
and I was in an hour worth of traffic outside of Tough Kenneman.
it's
I mean, I wasn't 4 miles away, never made it. I
And
just
there's
went
only
home.
one road. That's
Yeah.
the worst part.
But that was about 10 o'clock, and I
Yeah.
just turned around and went home after
Now,
an hour.
You got to be there by
to
now.
11 this year. But the show, they close the airstrip at noon. But the show never gets going at the stroke of noon anyhow. But it's a nice show if you've never been there.
Yeah, I've been there several times.
Several of us here have been trying to help them out for quite a number of years. And they're nice people. There is some food there, but I recommend you bring your own.
So like hot dogs.
Scratch the food effort, you know. The horror story at the best.
I think the question was how old is old. I think 25 years old is probably the right answer.
You mean to be accepted?
Yeah. And they are taking more modern old
Yes.
cars now.
Yes.
And they're parking the newer ones down below,
The lower
the
hand.
old ones up top.
That's
So
it.
they really expanded it last year. The British Car Club was there.
Oh, we had a lot of cars there last year.
Yeah.
The drawback there last year was that we had the deluge of rain and lightning and all that other stuff that was.
Yeah, rain last year, Tom?
One time. And that newer
Rain
curb down
last
there
year?
doesn't allow that.
Did it rain?
Didn't rain on me. I'll have
Did it rain?
Anyway. Thanks, Tom.
Don't thank me, I'm
If you
not paying
fellas
for any
would
of it.
like, why don't you roam around here a little while and raise the hoods or anything you want to. I'll go in and quick make up a schedule and run it off on my copy machine, give each one, and then you can either fill it out now or take it home and
Say it's
send it
stamped,
back to me.
right.
And that way I won't have to mail you each one. Okay?
You've been how far as King?
Huh?
You've been on either shore.
Oh, yeah. I was there many years ago, and it stormed hit, and the power went off, and the hangars wouldn't shut, and the planes were flying inside the hangar like we were hanging on trying to figure out what a thrill.
We got rain one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can bring Indian Lumia for it. You'll see a lot of Indians there if you've never been there. Oh my, they have, of course, they're president countries. But he doesn't believe in reform. And we just gave away the elections.
Well, look at 3 seater.
Where did Gravity get?
Is it really?
Yeah, 213.
I think there's history on that. If you read that history, what's the name?
Yeah, and I can't recall what anything we
It was not a fixed design. You could make it what you wanted.
Out there.
You can get the plate design and make it what
He
you
doesn't
wanted.
believe in reform. The only one I ever knew him restored.
I don't know. I've never seen a red
One
one
he
in
restored was
Lincoln.
a department.
See what's right in the middle, right below it, though, don't you?
And one of the small.
Your flag. Your flag, dude.
You know what he's like?
My daughter,
Pretty well snapped up.
tell me what it is.
You're gonna be in the
Value?
value?
Or is this just a silver card? Very early silver card.
You could consider
Demand is one thing, rare is another thing, and the surviving number is another thing. As far as convention is concerned, in my estimation,
you're
there was
probably about
nothing.
100 miles southeast
But
of
they have to be
Kingston.
saved, so that becomes some value.
Yeah,
But as a true steam effort, and an early, and if you want to call an antique car, there was no Stanley. It had the horsepower. You know, what engines do you have, and the authenticity of it. They're building Stanleys now, and as far as we were talking about tonight, there were 3 he had, he only had one that's any good.
Right.
The rest of them are all fakes. Well, when I discovered that and appraised them, he's still our friend out there in West Pennsylvania right now. And I started just trying to figure out where I live so I can blow my house up.
I'm messing around with British Morgans.
Oh, good, great. Get into the 3-wheelers. Yeah, let's get like that there. What I find West Pennsylvania is standing there coming out like goddamn woodwork now.
Pieces of bearing a while.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, you're not allowed to take movies in here. I'm sorry, son. That's what you want to see that board down there? Pull it out there and take a picture. It used to be over here. It used to hang up over here. I don't really know why it got out of here.
Which one, the round one or the board?
One of the old automobile manufacturing associations. That's the one. That's it.
Oh, and shove it in the boiler. Check. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. That's it. Yeah, that's all work. Yeah, you can run steam up the stack and get gram ready.
That would be continuous or that would be?
No, that's only when you're steaming. Once you get running, you blast up the stack, which is what you're in.